I appreciate that, and I'm sure the filmmakers do as well. My name's Clayton Davis. I'm the Senior Awards Editor at Variety. How did you love Killers of the Flower I assume that clap was more that you loved Killers of the Flower Moon and not so much that I'm here today, but I know you all came here for that. Listen, it's a very special movie, some very special people, and I ran into some people outside that love to bring out and chat with you a little bit. Sound good? It's good. All right. First person I'll call out. You know that band that you liked when you were in high school, and you felt like only you knew about the band, and then everyone starts discovering them. You're like, I loved the band way before the band got famous. And that's how I feel about Lily Gladstone, because I saw her in movies like Certain Women, where she just lit up the screen, and here as Molly Burkhart breaks your heart into pieces. Ladies and gentlemen, Lily Gladstone. Breakout of this movie. You've never heard of him before. I think he's going places in this world. I don't know what to say other than he plays a buffoon, but it's one of his best performances, and that says a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award winner Leonardo DiCaprio. Good job. All right. Listen, so honored to be sitting here talking to the both of you. I'll start with you, Lily. This was such an undertaking for you, both physically, emotionally. The story needed to be told. There are people who had no idea that this happened, and is based on a very well-known book where we get to learn some pretty horrific things that we already knew was happening to the indigenous community. Can you please talk about taking this on at this point in your career?
Yeah, I mean, everything up till this point has been pretty independent, so it was a big leap. There was, with that, just historically our representation in this level of film has been spotty at best. So there was an element of just worry because it is such a big thing to carry. I feel like I'm lucky that my introduction to Martin Scorsese as a filmmaker wasn't Goodfellas, wasn't Casino, it was Kundun. So I had immediately the association that if it were going to happen at this level, this story, then it's the right person doing it. I found myself, I think, the last thing that I said on set when we wrapped and we got to give our little wrap speech was just how throughout I was struck by, I think the nerves of it were when I was getting in my head too much, but the actual work of it felt so authentically familiar. It was, Leo said it when we started that Taxi Driver is his favorite independent film, and that put it in my mind. It's like, okay, this is still the same filmmaker, but generations of practice, and yeah, it's at some point just the focus on the work was what made it, because there was a lot to try to put yourself in your head about and be nervous about, but then it was just committed artists.
Thank you. Senior DiCaprio, your sixth collaboration with Martin Scorsese, your third collaboration with Robert De Niro. You're obviously having a really bad time working with them as much as you are. It shows. how does this time differ from all the other times, especially with such an important story?
Well, I grew up here in Los Angeles, so the reverence for the Scorsese, De Niro dual relationship of actor and filmmaker was on the uppermost tier of echelons for young actors. It's all we spoke about in our younger age, and to be able to have gotten to have my first opportunity working with Mr. De Niro on This Boy's Life, to then have him sort of refer me to Marty, saying there's this kid, I just worked with him, and then having done, 6 films with him now? Something like that. I mean, and then 30 years later, now getting to work with the both of them, my two sort of cinematic heroes, and creating this entire sort of story and narrative of these characters was, needless to say, one of the highlights of my entire career in life. To watch the two of them and their almost telepathic communication with one another, that can only be the result of this intrinsic relationship of knowing each other ever since their youth. And I got to be a part of that sort of trilogy. And especially, I remember some of my most distinct memories were us speaking at great length about that final confrontational scene that you all just saw with Hale's character and Ernest's. Developing Ernest was interesting because out of all the stuff that I researched, all his writings, all the testimony, speaking to relatives in Oklahoma, the one resounding, consistent element was that this man was quite slow and easily manipulated. That Hale had this mental stronghold over him. I happened to have done a film that was This Boy's Life, where I had an abusive sort of stepfather in De Niro, so it was this insanely coincidental, full circle, sort of similar relationship, and it felt like I was stepping into the same character, or a similar character, 30 years later, grown up. He was still this abusive character. He was the abusive stepfather. But what was fascinating with both of them was to watch their process. Mine was much different. Marty and I have our own sort of relationship. We talk about things at great length and great detail. We throw things out. But they have this almost instinctual connection that is almost hard to describe. And we worked tirelessly on that last scene because it was the culmination of this relationship. And was it going to be this antagonistic, slay your father, your abusive father figure sort of confrontation where I'm reaching through the bars, we're fighting. And every time we kept getting to that point, both of them and all three of them, it's like, they would go, no, let's get to what the truth of this would be. The truth is, it is a father's. As horrific as that relationship is, as horrific as Hale is, he is the abuser, he is the father figure. And it would be incredibly difficult to lash out at your father like that. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't do that to you guys. So it became more and more this distilling of what the truth was in the relationship. And Marty became obsessed with that scene and how to end it. And we spent 4 weekends together just talking it through because he wanted it to be as real as possible. And that's that was what was absolutely mesmerizing about Marty on this movie. I've never seen him more completely obsessed with getting to the truth of a story. He so wanted to tell the story correctly because he felt an incredible responsibility, especially after meeting the Osage community and telling this lost chapter of American history.
Thank you. For both of you, learning the Osage language, and Lillian, you speak about this a lot, and there is no one indigenous language, there's so many. What was the process of learning this particular one for the both of you?
I got ahead of it as best as I could before I got there, and then also had a lot of language lessons leading up, because unlike Leo, I had just gone fluent. He does sound fluent in a way that a white husband would. So Osage, as far as language revitalization effort in Indian country, they're incredibly advanced, and it was really wonderful to see that as a Native person. Osage have a beautiful orthography. I went on the language app the same day I got the offer for Molly, which happened to be Molly Burkhart's birthday, December 1st. Nobody designed it that way. Maybe Molly designed it that way. But yeah, I picked up the phonetics and I taught myself as best as I could the system before I had my first lesson. And then when I walked in, I had enough of a handle with that, which was wonderful. And then got the corrections, because it's constantly being refined. You know, languages evolve, they're not fixed. We had the Osage language department was, you know, everybody was hands on deck for the film, because there was a lot of it spoken, a lot of characters speaking it. It took me a solid several months to get comfortable enough with all of the phonemes and morphemes and just syllabics. It was the only other indigenous language, and I've spoken them pretty often in films I do, not at this length. And the one that I'm most comfortable with, again, I'm not fluent in, but my own language, Blackfeet. I can introduce myself, I know the bad words, I know the characters. But that's it's such a different system. So like it would be like, I don't know, growing up speaking hearing a parent speak German a little bit, so you can pick it up a little, and then being expected to learn Mandarin. It's like the two are very different. So yeah, I found when we got to it, it was really listening to the women speakers, because men and women in Osage have different dialects. My first language teacher taught me the building blocks, you know, really helped me lay the foundation. And then my second teacher, Janice Carpenter, helped me like put the dressing on the windows, you know, just really refine it. And a lot of her demeanor and how she conducts herself went into Molly as well. But I found myself, when I was speaking in Osage, by the time we were shooting, by the time I'd been getting enough language lessons that I was starting to be able to construct my own sentences, which is what I'd hoped for. If we had a moment where I needed to throw something out in Osage, I could. It's left me now. I found myself feeling and finding Molly way more in the language than in English. And we made Molly, for the purposes of our film, more fluent and proficient in English than is spelled out in the book. Actually, one of the biggest clues that Ernest did love Molly, because that was one of our big questions early on, that there was a loving relationship here, was that Ernest learned Osage to be able to communicate with her more effectively. And it's like, for being a simple man, that's a pretty, I know how hard it was to learn. Granted, he had like a full immersion being married into the family. The book talked about that, how Ernest learns the language to speak with her.
You gave me a great transition, segue into the next point. I'd say that the movie has a twist, and the twist is Ernest loved Molly. It's like Sixth Sense level twist that, you know, he was dead at the end. It was like, oh, he actually did love her. But also, for me, I always call this the scene that proves it. What's the scene that like stays with you long after? And for me, it's insulin. It's like one word that just ripples through, and that it's layered with so many different things. Can you talk about the composition of that scene and just getting to the truth, and maybe answering that question whether Ernest loved Molly or how much she even knew?
We don't want to crack it, really, because it's supposed, to me, I feel like that scene was designed, and the work that I studied most leading into it had nothing to do thematically with, but just performance-wise, was Philip Seymour Hoffman in Doubt. We wanted that scene at the end to change, depending on how you watch the film. You believe the love, you believe the manipulation, in what capacity, and it goes for both characters. is I had a little backpack full of facts about Molly through the trial and after the trial that gave me enough of an agenda to play with, but then also the given circumstances and still having love, you know. One thing I'll say about it that is tangible and won't change and did go into my process was what else was in the insulin. When we spoke to the family, it was really Billy Burkhart, Molly's grandson, who still sneaks up behind me when I go back to Osage country and goes, "Hey, Grandma." Billy? Billy told us that the family pretty much decided, after a century to think about it, that she was being poisoned with arsenic and morphine. So the combination of morphine to kind of dull the effects of the arsenic, but also it addicted her to the process. So that was one thing I really played with in Transference on Ernest, was Molly was being given a highly addictive substance that was the only thing that was making her feel better along with the insulin. She was indeed one of the first 5 people in the world to receive insulin. So that was doing its job. But also she had this underlying very strong addiction she had no idea about and who's giving it to her. So the last segment after Molly's lucid again, that breaking the cycle of addiction, which I've witnessed in my family, a lot of my close friends, that was in the work. There was a physical addiction she was absolutely unaware of, but it was very much embodied with Ernest.
I mean, I think that as far as the relationship is concerned, you know, I have my own take on, after doing the research, what their relationship was like, but it's up for interpretation. I mean, that's the whole key of it all. I think our model was after we saw Montgomery Clift and The Heiress, which was a very influential film for us to create the dynamic between, and of course, A Place in the Sun. We also modeled a lot of the screenplay after that. But, you know, there was this, we had to do a lot of detective work. And, you know, the one, David Grant's book is incredibly extensive and incredibly detailed, but there is this 1 year of time. and, you know, after talking with the Osage community, their true belief is she was absolutely being sedated, being drugged, being poisoned. But he never, of all the things he never admitted that. He would never admit to the fact that he was doing this to his wife.
She was just sick. She was just sick. I was eating the same food as her. She was just sick.
Exactly. So, but you start to look at the evidence, you become like a detective yourself, and you say, oh, isn't this, and that was in the journey of us sitting there listening to the Osage community, coming there to hear their side of the story, rather than just David Grant's book, which was incredibly detailed and amazing. But, you know, coincidentally, she was locked away for a year under his care. The FBI is snooping around after, you know, she went to Washington, sort of paid off the Federal Bureau of Investigation to please come into Native American territory and try to figure out what's going on with these murders. She gets locked away for a year, is incredibly sick, does not leave the house, and then what miraculously happens after she's taken away from the house, she immediately gets better. She immediately gets better, and the case goes to trial. And so I think we talked, it's one of the things we talked most about, not only about how, you know, the whole structure of the movie was a different one too. There was a whodunit element at first, but we didn't know how much we wanted to show Ernest complicit in all of this, how much we wanted to relate to the audience. So oftentimes we'd be in this journey together discussing, what do you know that I know that you know that I know? And, you know, we just played the scenes as best we possibly could and tried to, you know, become these characters. But this one subject was something that we were incredibly extensive in discussions about to try to get right. That's all I can say.
We have to give big shout outs here to, you know, Eric Roth, who co-wrote this with Mr. Scorsese, another part of the great cast, Jesse Plemons, Cara Jade Myers, who's just wonderful in it, one of the best DPs today. As you're looking through the lens of people who don't know, because a lot of people came to this not knowing the story, but have you heard the book? We know Native American history, and we know some of it, or say, we know some of Native American history about what happened 1492 and on, but a lot of people were probably surprised that this was still going on even in the 1930s. And I think what's most interesting, if anyone here watches docu-series like my wife does, it's interesting to see how bad criminals are then, that like it wasn't so obvious what they were doing, or worse yet, that no one cared what they were doing. What message do you have for people? Because I'm always wondering about the call to action. What do we do now?
I mean, there's still a lot of it going on. It's not, it doesn't have a word like the Reign of Terror necessarily, but just speaking within this film. And, you know, if we're really talking about lasting change, we need to look at systems change. And it's so nice to be with the union, thank you. This subtitle of this book is The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. This case is what created the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was just the Bureau at that time. J. Edgar Hoover's public favor had been kind of waning, so for him it was almost a PR opportunity when Osage had brought the money and asked for somebody to come and do something, because they didn't know where to look. You know, this was so much a part of the community there, the non-native community there. It could be anybody, it was a lot of people. The legacy, it's deeply ironic that it was a case solving, it was a case that was attempting to solve the murders of Native people that created the FBI. Today, on reservations, tribal governments, tribal police don't have the jurisdiction that's necessary to protect mostly our women, but our Native people. It falls to the federal government. So if someone were to commit on a reservation that was not tribally enrolled there, if they were to commit a violent crime, like murder, the only people that could prosecute them would be the feds, and they don't do it. It's tribal police. They can arrest people and detain people who are enrolled in the tribe. Sometimes they can detain them long enough to hand them off to the state, depending on the case. But really, like maximum, most places you can throw somebody in like the drunk tank for up to 2 weeks. So it has created disproportionately an epidemic of missing murdered Indigenous people on this continent. It didn't start with the Reign of Terror. It's been that way since 1492, and it hasn't ended since the Reign of Terror. It's some reservations in this country, it is 9 times, a Native woman is 9 times more likely to be murdered than anybody else, any other subset. So it's really the conversation for us, and one of the reasons it keeps getting blocked is tribal sovereignty. We did have the capacity for our own tribal governments to convict Native, non-Native, whoever, within tribal lands before the 1970s. There was a federal case, the Supreme Court case, Oliphant, that overturned that. It would take another Supreme Court case to go back to the way it was, where we could have the tools necessary to protect ourselves. Which really, in the film, like they say, you know, if we could see our enemy, we would kill them. And I'm not saying that's what we do now. If we had the power to protect our people, we would use it. You know?
My final question for the both of you, because it's very, heavy experience, but you two are the greatest actors working today, and I'd like to, Leo, if you could say something that you saw with Lily on set that maybe we didn't know, something that's great about her, and Lily, say something terrible about Leo, things that, we all know, but, you want to bring to light. No, obviously, please just say something that we might be surprised about the other ones.
Surprised to learn. That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm used to talking about what the experience was like with her, which was a pretty profound one. And I keep telling the story of how, right after we first met her, Marty immediately said, "She's it, we must hire her now." Because she embodied Molly in a way that, and I've said it before, Marty talks about shape-shifting. She came on set as Molly. She was a partner in this process. And she really, in a lot of ways, steered the course of, I think, the entire narrative of the movie and the relationship. I mean, there's so many things and such, some little details of what she added to this relationship that it's a laundry list. One of the main ones was, her idea of the coyote, the theme of the coyote, the trickster, the idea that she intrinsically did have this knowledge that, and this wisdom that, oh yes, here's this white man coming into my land, and the trickster, the coyote, is something that is prevalent in Native American stories. It's a disruptor. It's someone that's trying to take advantage. And one of the first things she says to me in the movie, it's, "I know who you are. I know exactly who you are." Yet it changed the whole course of the entire relationship, because then you understand that there was this sort of, how do I put it, this codependence on one another. She also knew that in order to be a part of, normal society and obtain her wealth, as an Osage, there was this relationship that needed to happen. And that transferred onward into the relationship with the girls when they're all talking, which was one of the first scenes that blew me away when I watched this movie, how the complexity of that, all of them having this sort of knowledge of the surroundings that they're in, realizing that there are certain people out there to take, not necessarily take advantage, but referring to them as different animals, all of that. I mean, I could go on and talk about what she gave to not only me as an actor and creating this relationship, but the entire narrative of the movie. I mean, she really became the heart and soul of this story. And more than anything, she made us single-handedly realize as we're making it that she is, I am the sort of untrustworthy protagonist, but she's the heroine, And that's what we realized as soon as Lily became on board, because she brings that depth, not only that depth of knowledge, but that soul and that embodiment of, in this case, Molly Burkhart.
Closing us out. What is it about Leo?
I can feel the tabloids listening. I learned a lot about his music tastes. I mean, we did talk about like what would Ernest and Molly have listened to together, and then going through like what the playlist would have been in the house. I was sitting there trying to calm down it was a real kid, but one of our fake kids, a stunt kid. I was sitting there trying to calm him down, and I was singing Rockin' Chair to him, and Leo knew that song, and he started singing along. It's like, oh, this guy likes blues and jazz, and then we bonded over 90s hip-hop, Gangstar and Guru. So I learned that his music tastes are either like classic jazz, blues, whatever, or 90s hip-hop. There's no in between. There's nothing else.
Can't ask for anything more. Listen, there's a reason why this movie, as the awards editor, I'm supposed to, let you guys in on something. Won award this year. New York Film Critics named this movie Best Film and Lily Gladstone Best Actress, which As we close out right now, I have to be the bad guy here, but I'm the bad guy on behalf of Leo and Lily. They have to run out of here, so I have to ask you to sit as you clap for them. Or actually, you can stand up, but they have to run off stage. So ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Leonardo DiCaprio.